house. And then we'll talk about some learning opportunities and other upcoming events. Andrew, did you intend to take the first part of the next slide?
Sure. Yeah, I'm ready to go for it.
Awesome.
All right. So for today's stuff, we wanted to teach you guys how to do like a reviewing process for Survey123. So I know at least in the state parks, a lot of folks are trying to stand up using Survey123, and that's really awesome because you can maybe have a bunch of volunteers collect data for you, whether it's like something that's happening on the trail, you have an event going on, and then maybe you want to make a public web app that shows up after. But the idea is we don't always want to show the public everything that was collected right off the bat. We might want someone to be in the middle of that and proof the stuff and review the process. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what kind of workflows you can use, how to make a default pending attribute in that field of your Survey123, and what the views are. So we'll get to that. I won't spoil the fun there. How to build a public version that has your verified entries, how to do the map viewer and editing. And so if you're good with it, Brian, I'll jump into the app flow.
Yep, that's perfect. Thank you.
All right. So depending on how you're going to collect your data, you could either use Survey123. The biggest benefit of that is that you can have it open to the public. Anyone can submit to that survey. You could even have like a QR code that's out there in the public that can collect public survey entries. The other option is to use ArcGIS FieldMaps. So that's if you have staff that are GIS enabled and they have a GIS license, they can contribute and collect data on the field, whether it's points, lines, or polygons. And that's really cool because that data is going to be more geographic centered versus Survey123 might be more about the information collection, having those quick and easy drop downs. We did a training last year. I think we realized it was May 2022, but we have a link at the end of this PowerPoint that shows you how to build your own Survey123 for the first time to collect data, GIS data, form data, and how to use the web editor to do that. So if you're wondering why we're jumping right into this, it's because we kind of did a first round of this back in May last year, and now we're picking up where we left off. So if you use Survey123, the next step would be to create a editing web map or web app, and then you'd finally have a public web app or app. Same thing with FieldMaps. You have this intermediate phase, which is what Brian's going to talk a lot about, and then you have the final public view. And that's really all there is to it. But you can think of a couple examples of this. Like, say, what I do is someone collects the data in the field, and I want to review it before it ends up public. But maybe there's a partner involved that's the one that's doing the review data. So you could have different people review different fields and have that default pending. I won't say too much because Brian's going to go into the details and the visual of this, but I'll let him go on from there.
Awesome.
And we'll leave this. I'll stop sharing these slides, but you guys are welcome to use this for reference. We'll send this PowerPoint back out after in case you're wondering what the steps are along with the recording of this video.
Awesome. And Andrew, if you don't mind just pulling those up for just one more second, I'm going to use that slide that you had prepared for the pending review and the subsequent slide as well, just to kind of talk about the concepts a little bit.
Sure.
So, Andrew was referencing in one of our previous meetings, we kind of set up how to establish that Survey123, and this is, please review that recording if you're not familiar with that already, but that'll be available for you to review and kind of follow along step by step if you need that. The intent here, like he was referencing, was that we might receive this information from the public or from different field staff, and there's kind of that process where we need to see, is that an authoritative submission? Is it something that we want to kind of flow through to our apps and maps there in the end? And so what we're going to be doing is creating a new field in this for that data layer and using it to help us establish views as well as a process for approving those submissions. And so that's kind of what this pending review field is intended to do. And so if you'll switch to that next slide, Andrew. And he was mentioning a lot about these views in ArcGIS Online. when we initially set up these surveys, it's going to automatically create a feature layer within our ArcGIS Online content. And that feature layer is going to be the parent feature class for us to base other quote unquote views off of. We can use these views in many different ways. We can establish filters to only look at certain types of data within those views. And we can also leverage them for this type of purpose so that we can use that to filter by this data reviewer category to know whether or not the data steward has approved that submission to flow through to the other views and for web maps and applications. And so just wanted to kind of, I know we briefly talked about that in the beginning, but just kind of use these slides to introduce those concepts. So now I'm going to switch over to sharing my screen. All right, and here we go. So here we are in Survey123. We have previously set up this Survey123, and this is what that recording will show. And so we have a lot of data in here already from a lot of submissions. And, we can review that data in Survey123 as well, and we can look at it, and we can, being the owner of the survey, we can make changes here. The thing that we really want to do is to incorporate other people, other staff in this review process, or maybe we want something a little bit more streamlined instead of just reviewing data and editing data within the Survey123 app. So to look at, I'm going to show you kind of what it looks like in the end if we were to, what this will look like when we get to the very end real quick. So this is a different one that I've set up the same sort of workflow on. We have a lot of different content in here. We have a parent hosted feature class here. And then we also have these other hosted views. We've established a view for just the data reviewer. And this is filtered by the pending types of data in that data reviewer category. We have a verified entries view where we've just filtered that by the ones that have been approved. And then we also have a view that's specific to Survey123 in that public data collection. This kind of comes as default when we're generating that. And I'll show you exactly what this looks like in the beginning, and you'll see how that progresses through. We've also created a new web map for that data reviewer to use in evaluating those initial submissions. And then we've created another web map for those verified entries so that anything that's already been reviewed by that data reviewer and approved for submission, then those will show up in this web map, just leveraging these different views and different web maps. So if I were to go into my data reviewer web map, for instance, and I open that in Map Viewer, then what I'm going to see here is that there's still one submission that's waiting here for me that has a pending, that is pending as far as that sort of submission. And I need to find the editing button. So in this map viewer, you have an editing button as long as there's, and as long as this layer is approved for editing. We'll get into that a little bit more as well. I'm going to use this select. I'm going to grab that feature and kind of review the information that's associated with that submission. So what type of topic did they want us to crack? They want a way to review and approve public data entry. And so, me as the data reviewer, I'm saying, well, that seems like a pretty good idea, and it's not just a bogus submission. So I'm going to change that from pending to verified, and I'm going to update that data. Now what happens is it disappears from this web map, and if I open the other one, it'll be within that web map. So that's kind of the concept we're looking for here. And then we can establish a public-facing web application that has all of those different submissions that have been verified. This helps us keep a little bit better track of our data, and just so that we don't have bogus entries, and we have a little bit more control about what's being submitted and then viewed on the public side. So if I go back to my content here, We're going to base all of this off of that previous Survey123 that we had developed. We have various entries in there. And so we're going to go back to our ArcGIS Online content. We're looking for this, the folder that includes the content associated with this Survey123. So the TDEC GIS user group app demo. I'm going to go back there. These are all going to begin with survey. That's how they are default named. And here we go. So we had subsequent training sessions where we developed dashboards and showed how to build a basic web map, but we still haven't embarked on this kind of new concept of a data reviewer in that workflow. So we have we already have some views that have been established just as a default. This one is approved for public data collection just because in the Survey123 app on our Collaborate tab, we have indicated this is for anyone to submit from the public. And then we also have another hosted view. You kind of get these already just automatically generated when you're creating a Survey123. You'll get this, and you'll notice that this one that says hosted, this is a feature layer that's hosted that is the parent of these child views. So we have these two views that are associated with that. The first thing that we're going to want to do in this process is add that data reviewer field. So we're going to go into this parent hosted feature. We're going to go into our data tab. And currently we don't have anything that helps us establish whether or not this has been reviewed. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. We're going to go look at our fields and then add a new field. We're just going to call it review without a capital E. Display name is going to be the same. I'm going to reduce the length a little bit. And here I'm going to go ahead and put a default value. And I'm going to put this as pending. This means that any new submissions will come in with that default of pending in this field. So we're going to add that new. All right, so that is saved. Another thing that we're going to want to do is for this field, we're going to go ahead and create what's called a domain or a list. And these are a list of values. So in that label, we're going to have one of them be pending, and we're just going to call that code P. We're going to add one more that's called verified. We're just going to code that as V. So now, as in establishing these list of values, these are going to be the only values that people can enter in that data reviewer tab, and it's going to be a drop down, just like I was showing you earlier. That way, we don't have any, issues with people accidentally spelling pending wrong or accidentally spelling verified wrong, etc. Just helps us keep better control over our data quality. So we're going to save that, and now you'll notice that we have a new field called review. The next thing we're going to go do is go back to our content, and we're going to start to do a little bit more cleanup on these view names. So on this one that is the public data collection, we're going to go ahead and go in there and rename it so that it's a little bit more clear. We're going to save that one. We're not really going to put any filters on it. We're just going to leave it the same. We don't really need anything different out of that view. But we're also going to leave the parent hosted feature class the same. And then on the first hosted view here, we're going to take this one and we're going to rename it Data Reviewer. We're going to save that. Now, another thing that we want to do on this one is we're going to only look at data. We're going to put a filter on it. And this is under the visualization tab. Once we have that in here, over on the right side, we can create a filter. We're going to add an expression. And we only want to see the data where review is pending. All right, so now we have that established. Everything's set good there. Oh, one other thing that we want to check is just to make sure. Let's see here. I'm missing something here real quick. Sorry for the delay. I'm gonna keep going here. There's, I was hoping to enable editing to show the capability and include other folks to be able to edit it, but I think I need to. I'm missing a setting real quick, but out of interest of time, I want to go ahead and keep moving on. I have the ability to edit those myself. Oh, I think it's because I see what it is. We set it to be public because we were using it for something else. So if I set that to organization, enable editing, nothing like a little live troubleshooting. So we're going to save that after we've enabled editing for our organization. That means that we'll be able to edit it, but people externally won't be able to. Had to change those share settings first. Now what we're going to go do is go back to our parent hosted feature layer, go to the overview, and we're going to create another view layer since we didn't have another one to hijack for those purposes. So we're going to use this, that parent hosted feature class. We're going to add a filter. I'm going to say is not pending. You can also say is verified, but I have a lot of old submissions in there and I don't want to have to go through and change all those to verified. So we're just going to use review is not pending for these purposes. And it doesn't like my name for some reason. Must have had too many special characters or something in there. What we're doing is creating this additional view so that we'll be able to leverage it in our public facing application. So now that we've done that, we go back to our content. And I'm just going to go ahead and rename it so that it's consistent. Awesome. And I'm going to just make sure on our settings, we don't really want anybody to edit that view, so we'll just leave that unchecked. Very good. So now we're going to take that one that we created for the data reviewer, that hosted view, and we're going to open that in Map Viewer. And now that we have let's make sure that that is still, let's make sure that that filter is still in place. It looks like a lot of entries were in there. Awesome. Cool. So now oops, I didn't save it. I just did the same thing again. Apologies. This button up here sometimes will trick you and you'll lose it, so make sure that you're saving that. Awesome. I bet I did the same thing on the other one. Good deal. So now we're going to open that data reviewer tab or view. We're going to open that in Map Viewer. It's not going to show any entries currently because we don't have anything that is pending at this time. Over here, we can save this web map. We're going to be mindful to save it in the same folder where we set all of the rest of it up so that it's all organized. And I'm going to give it some description. If I can spell. I usually name it the same as that view so that things can be pretty consistent. You can understand which layers are being leveraged in which map. So we're going to save that. Now we've established a place where the data reviewer can go. And as long as they have access to this within our organization, they can navigate to the map and be able to review those entries. So we're going to go back here now, look at establishing a new entry in the Survey123. All right, now that is submitted. And so usually what I'll do is just set up like a shortcut link to this web mapping application, if I'm using it on a regular basis, that sort of thing. And now if I go ahead and refresh this web map, sometimes it takes just a second. It's lagging a little bit, unfortunately. And there are settings in the actual web maps for refresh and those sorts of things as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get that set to as low as possible. I'm going to circle back to that in just a second after it's given that some time. The other thing that we'll do is I'm just going to go ahead and, well, I'll leave that for later. Let's see. I'm going to make sure we've got, here's our public facing hosted view. This is everything that we want to be displayed in the public application. I'm going to go to our visualization tab and save that filter. There we go. Go back to our overview. Open this in a map viewer. That one's still showing as pending. Let's go back real quick. So we can look at the data that's associated with each of these. So we have 0 in our data reviewer, on our public data collection. We have all 13 that were submitted, and that's unfiltered. And then in our public facing layer, something must be going on with the filter on this one. There we go. So now we've got that one coming through. if we go back to our content, and look at our public facing layer, let my internet catch up for a second. Now we can generate that public facing map. It's going to have a little bit of lag too, but we can go ahead and get it saved. So now we've got that saved here. We'll just give it some time to let that layer refresh. We already verified that it was within the data in the content, but the mapping application just needs to get caught up. And another thing we can do after we've established that public facing web mapping application or web map, then we can create a mapping application. Oh, I know what I did. I saved it in my all content. And I'll remove that. If you ever do save it in just your parent directory, then you can always just check that box right next to it and then move it over. That way you can kind of keep things organized so you don't have a mess like I do. And there's that. So we could either just open it up in that map viewer again. Another thing that we can do is also just create a web map. One thing that's very handy for instances where you're not trying to do something that's terribly complicated is use these instant apps. I think we've talked a little bit about those before. So if you're just looking to establish a pretty basic one, then you might be able to just pick one that's already been already configured and makes things pretty easy. So we're not going to go into that just right now, but that's also something that we might hone in on in more detail later. I guess at this time, if anybody has any questions on the overall workflow and how those different things interact, it might be a good time to take questions specifically on the demo, or if Andrew, you have anything that you think I might need to polish up.
I think it's great. Have you had to use this so far for any applications that you're currently doing, or have plans to do that?
Yeah, the one that I mainly use it for is we have the reusable litter bags that we're handing out for Clean Streams for Tennessee. I think I've talked a little bit about it before on here, so actually pull up that. It's actually a good time to talk about it just because with spring and everything, there's so many folks that are doing cleanups at this time of year. So we have these reusable litter bags for stream cleanups with some information about the miles of river and acres of lakes and reservoirs in Tennessee and all the different biodiversity in the state. It has a QR code for Survey123 for folks to upload the location of the cleanup as well as a picture of their cleanup. And just so that we don't get like a bunch of bogus or weird pictures showing up on our web map, we've set it up so that we have a review process for those entries. So here's the AGOL content for that Survey 123. So I have a data reviewer web map, have all the verified entries here, and all the associated layers as well, or views. And so whenever there are new submissions, I'll just kind of have it on my calendar to check this mapping application. There shouldn't be any in here. I just checked it earlier today. But when there are new entries, then I'll go in here, click our edit button, look at those entries, make sure that it's not just some crazy photo, and then change that to a verified entry, and then that flows on through to that mapping, this web map, the verified entries. So that's one area where I've been using it most recently.
That's great. Yeah, I'll show a demo after this of one that we're using too, doing the same process.
Very nice. Yeah, sorry for a couple of those hiccups. It threw me for a loop there for a second, and then hopefully I recovered fast enough. But if anybody's got any questions or needs to establish these workflows, I'll be glad to help answer any questions. It's a really helpful thing just because it's helps to establish not only for that initial review process for submissions, but you can imagine that there's also kind of like a pipeline of workflows where, let's say, Andrew went to go review a site and do that field determination and has some basic set of data from the field. Me as another manager of that data might need to make some other decision or prioritize that. Say, okay, there's vegetation impact there. We need to prioritize that on our scale to understand whether we need to go address that or not. And so then I can make not only these kind of verified submission determinations, but I can also then, use that same sort of workflow to say, okay, well, I want to prioritize that as a number 10. So we're going to take care of that. Or for instance, maybe assign it some other category of data based on my skill set or my knowledge or my responsibilities and my workflow. So it's not only just that kind of one stop, it could pass through multiple people. If I need to make a decision and then Richard or Andrew or somebody else kind of needs to take that after that next step, you can establish all those views in that way to kind of pass it along to those different folks who need to make different decisions for stewardship of that data.
Yeah, we had a good question from Andrew. They said, could you also flip this system to solicit user feedback? Say like, allow users to let you know if there's an issue with an item, or is there a better way to do that?
Yeah, most definitely. So you can, it would kind of depend on how you were wanting to receive that feedback. If it were something where you were looking for someone to be able to add data to that feature, then you could definitely set it up so that that would still be editable by them and make it so that you could receive that information either within the base attribute table or related table. There's also one of the more straightforward ways is if you don't want to allow access to that table for editing, then you can often just have something like, do you see an issue with this? And you could establish just a whole nother Survey 123 that self-populates based on that feature information. It says, here's feature ID 001. This is the person. You could ask them, for their email and phone contact, and then to describe what is wrong with the data or provide more information about what they see as an issue.
That's awesome. Yeah. What do you got, Richard?
I was just going to mention that I have been doing something similar to that in with a web app for a couple of years now in the water well program. We created an app that allows public users to report well locations. And 2 or 3 of the fields that we ask for are the driller tag number, the inspection tag number, or the well number if they happen to know it. And at that point, you theoretically could, you can relate that back to a record that's already in our database. And the main purpose of it for us was to try and get correct locations. Thinking through the entire process, I've got an option for the users to choose their affiliation. It's open to the public, but there's some options there, if you're a TDEC employee, state parks or whatever, to kind of trust their data over a general public submission. I haven't really incorporated the entire workflow yet, but I have been collecting data for a couple of years now.
Yeah, there's kind of a myriad of ways that it can definitely be used, and that's a great example of one.
That's cool. Here's one last. I'll show you guys one last one example too. So that guy. Oh. So this is the Cemeteries Review app for the Historical Commission. They gave us 31,000 GIS points, and we mapped them here with a heat map. But the idea is, this is not the amount of cemeteries that we have in the state. This is just documented with GIS. So Graham Perry, who is running this system, has stacks and stacks of folders. He might have a Davidson County folder with some information, but he doesn't know the exact location. So let's say that there happens, one of us is in the TDEC building, Tennessee Tower, down in the basement, and we stumbled upon a crypt. Well, here you could enter, we look, okay, there's a couple stuff near the Capitol, but there's not here at the Tennessee Tower. So here, all the fields are optional, and we'll put in as much information as we can. We'll drop the point here. We've looked up to see, okay, it does not exist in the current database, or at least has not been approved. I'm going to drop a point there. Obviously, that's not the correct spot. Fill in as much of this as I can. And yeah, I know the exact location. I saw the gravestones under the tower, and I'll put in as much information. But I could submit this without, say, 30 fields filled out. And then Graham's going to be like, you know what? I actually have a name of this too in a paper folder. And so during the review process, he can go in and fill all this information in and then mark it as approved. And that's what shows up in the final version. And then the final versions will have more information, or as much as he can. It's kind of a best effort sort of thing. So having the people on the ground is one of the things that Survey123 allows us to do. We're the eyes and ears that are actually out there in the field. And then we're the people that can either provide more information or, as Richard said, have the expertise or authority to approve that stuff. So I just thought that was a pretty cool thing.